Lila Duskwalker had stopped counting the hours by moonrise because there was no moon in the cellar, only the seep of cold through stone and the drip-drip from the ceiling that struck the same rusted bucket until she wanted to scream at the sound. Her ankles were chained to an iron ring sunk into the floor. Every time she shifted her swollen legs to ease the pressure in her hips, the shackles bit deeper, sawing wet heat into skin already raw. 7 months pregnant, belly hard and low, she could not stand fully beneath the beams, and lying down made the child press against her spine until her breath came shallow. The air smelled of mold, stale ale, rat droppings, and the metallic tang of old blood rubbed into dirt. Sometimes, if she held still enough, she could separate the cellar's smells into layers and pretend she was trekking in the old forests. Mildew from the north wall where rain seeped through cracked mortar, wood rot in the left beam, mouse nests in the straw pile, old iron and old fear everywhere. It gave her mind something to do besides count pain and wait for footsteps. Besides, remember. Above her, boots crossed the trapdoor and voices rose through warped planks. "Still alive?" one of the smugglers called, followed by laughter. "For now," another answered. "Ashford paid extra if the pup comes breathing." Ashford? Lachlan. Cousin, pack brother in all but blood. The boy who used to braid burrs from her hair after shifts and swear no one would ever touch what was his. Lila closed her eyes and saw him again in the Duskwalker Hall 3 nights ago. Standing before the pack fire with grief painted neatly across his face as forged hunter maps lay open at his feet. "I argued for lenience," he had said, voice carrying to every elder. "But she led hunters to our border markers. The blood spilled is on her hands. Exile is mercy." Mercy. He had clasped her elbow hard enough to bruise while the others looked away. He had whispered at her ear as they marched her past the gate. "Fight, and I tell them your bastard isn't even pack-born." He had not taken her to the boundary, of course. He had handed her over at the abandoned border fort where old war banners rotted on the walls and rogues ran salt, silver, and stolen children through the pass. Lila remembered the exchange with a clarity that made nausea rise now. Lachlan had tossed a purse to the scar-jawed smuggler and said, "No marks above the collar. If she miscarries, I dock your tongues before I dock your pay." The smuggler had grinned. "What's the rush, Alpha Cousin? Thought traders got the cliff." Lachlan's smile never reached his eyes. "This one is useful. Keep her hidden. Keep her fed enough. The pup belongs to me." Lila had lunged despite her wrists tied behind her. "It's my child." His hand around her throat had come fast, familiar, practiced. "Everything in Duskwalker is mine now," he murmured, and to the rogues he added loudly, "At dawn I'll tell the pack she fled before sentence. Cowards run, let them spit at her name." Now, in the cellar, she pressed both palms over the curve of her belly and breathed through another twisting cramp that clenched low and mean. Not labor, she told herself. Too soon. Stress. Hunger. The baby shifted, a hard heel dragging beneath skin, and she swallowed a cry because the men above liked cries. She had learned that on the first day when one had opened the hatch, peered down with a lantern and said, "Beg pretty, and I might bring water," then pissed through the gap when she refused. "Please," she whispered anyway now, but not to them, to the small, restless life inside her. "Not yet. Stay with me. We wait. We survive. Do you hear me, little moon?" The answer came as a wet warmth between her thighs. Lila froze. For one suspended beat she thought she had lost bladder control from strain. Then another gush soaked the filthy hem of her dress and spread across the packed earth. Her breath snagged. No. No, no, no. The cramp that followed was not a cramp at all, but a force. A band of iron cinching her pelvis until spots burst behind her eyes. When the pain loosened a fraction, She stared at the dark patch beneath her and forced herself to think. Too soon for this. Too soon for full labor. Her mother had spoken of waters breaking like a river and then no going back. This felt like that, and not like that. One hard spill, then dampness, then pressure again. She couldn't tell if the baby had shifted onto her bladder, if fear had loosened her body, if fate had finally decided to finish what Lachlan started. She only knew she could not gamble. "Help!" she shouted before pride could stop her. "Please, someone, the baby's coming." Boots thudded overhead. The trapdoor scraped open a hand's width, spilling torchlight and the reek of tobacco. Scarjaw looked down, amused. "Early, is it? I need a healer." Her voice broke on the last word. "If you want the child alive, get a healer now." He spat into the dark, narrowly missing her shoulder. "Hear that?" he called to the others. "The traitor thinks she can order us." A chorus of chuckles answered. Another rogue came to peer in. "Should we unchain her?" Scarjaw snorted. "And let her bolt?" Ashford said, breathing, not comfortable. Another contraction hit. Lila folded around it as far as the chain allowed, forehead striking stone. She panted through her teeth. "Breathe. Count." Her mother's voice floated from memory, gentle despite winter winds and training bruises. "Pain is a tide, little duskling. Let it pass over, not through." Her mother was dead 6 years and buried under mountain cedar, yet in that moment Lila heard her more clearly than the men laughing above. "Water," Lila gasped when she could speak. "At least water." A skin dropped through the hatch. It burst on impact, leaking into dirt beyond her reach while the men roared. Something in her chest went still. Not hope. That had been beaten thin days ago. Something sharper. A line drawn. They were not waiting for birth. They were waiting for possession. If she labored here, chained in filth, they would take the child the instant it cried, and Lachlan would tell the pack whatever lie served him next. If she died, he would call it justice. If the baby died, he would call it fate. No one would come. No one knew where she was. No one was looking. The next contraction built, and with it came a violent certainty. She could not survive by enduring any more. Lila grabbed the chain with both hands and yanked, once, twice, teeth bared. Iron grated in the ring but held. She twisted, searching by touch. The floor around the staple was old, mortar cracked with damp. Her fingers found a loose stone edge slick with moss. Another scream tore out of her as pain seized her again. She turned it into effort, bracing one foot against the wall and wrenching sideways with all the strength left in her hips and shoulders. Above, a shout cut through the laughter. Then another. Farther off, sharp, military. Steel rang. Scarjaw swore. "What in the—" "To arms!" The hatch slammed shut. Footsteps pounded away. A horn sounded outside the fort, deep and carrying, followed by a crash so hard dust rained from the beams. Men yelled. Wolves answered. Not rogue howls. These were disciplined, layered, terrifying in their unity. Lila stared at the trapdoor, chest heaving, one hand on her belly as it tightened again. Battle had found the fort. Or the fort had finally found something worse than itself. "Move," she whispered to herself, to the child, to the dark. "Move now." She hooked her fingers under the loosened stone and ripped until nails bent back. Mortar crumbled. The iron ring shifted a fraction, enough to spark a wild, desperate thrill. Another blast shook the fort. Somewhere above, wood split and men screamed in sudden panic. Heavy paws thundered over the floorboards. A voice she did not know roared an order, deep enough to vibrate in her ribs. Lila braced and hauled again. The staple tore free on one side with a gritty shriek, pitching her backward. Pain lanced through her lower spine so hard her vision whitened. She bit her own wrist to keep from blacking out. tasting blood and cellar grime. The chain still trapped one ankle, but now the ring dragged with her. It was enough. Enough to crawl. She made it halfway to the wall beneath the hatch before footsteps pounded back overhead. The trapdoor slammed open and Scarjaw dropped down, crossbow in one hand, torch in the other. Smoke rolled in after him. "They're in the yard," he hissed, then saw the torn staple and bared his teeth. "You little bitch!" Lila shoved herself upright on shaking knees, chain clanking. "Help me, and I'll tell them you were kind." He laughed once, short and ugly. "No one's asking your story." He kicked her shoulder, driving her sideways, and crouched to grab her hair. "Ashford pays triple if I deliver both." The torchlight flashed on a knife at his belt as another contraction seized her, stronger than any before. Lila screamed and drove her free heel into his knee. It popped. He cursed, dropping the crossbow. She lunged for it, fingers brushing wood, but he caught the chain instead and yanked her back across the dirt. Above them, the fort shook with a single impact like thunder striking stone. The hinges of the trapdoor tore loose, and the entire slab ripped upward in a spray of splinters. Cold night air flooded the cellar, carrying pine smoke, snow, and blood. A massive silhouette filled the opening, backlit by fire from the yard above. For one impossible heartbeat, Lila saw only eyes, silver shot with blue, reflecting torchlight like drawn blades. Scarjaw released the chain and reached for his knife. "Back off! She's sold—" The stranger dropped through the opening before he finished. He landed between them with the controlled violence of a striking wolf, armor dark with rain and enemy gore, a crown braid hanging loose against his temple. Power hit the room a split second later, not scent exactly, but pressure, ancient and commanding, forcing the breath from Lila's lungs. Then he went still. His head snapped toward her, as if yanked by an unseen hook. His nostrils flared once. The world narrowed to that inhalation, wild lavender from her crushed braid, blood, fear, wet earth, labor. Mine. The word was not spoken, yet it cracked through her spine like lightning. Her wolf, half-starved and shaking inside her skin, surged up with a howl so fierce it made tears spring to her eyes. Mate. Impossible. Here, chained, filthy, with pain climbing her body in brutal waves, and him. Alpha King Bastion Darkhollow. She knew him from winter councils and war stories, the king who broke sieges in 3 nights, who smiled before executions, who never bowed except to graves. Blood striped one side of his face now. Something in that hard expression shattered when he looked at her belly, the chain, the raw skin on her ankles. Scarjaw lunged. Bastion moved without taking his eyes off Lila. One hand shot out, caught the rogue's throat, and smashed him into the wall hard enough to crack stone. The other braced on the broken hatch beam as if he might tear down the whole fort next. His voice shook once, barely, when he said, "You're safe now, little Duskfire." Scarjaw clawed at the hand crushing his throat, boots scraping uselessly against stone. Bastion's gaze never left Lila. It was not the glance of a victor checking collateral. It was hunger, fury, reverence, and disbelief colliding in one stunned, savage stare. Then his eyes flared. Silver irises flooded with molten gold for a heartbeat, wolf and king both surging to the surface. He dragged in a sharp breath, as if her scent had cut him open from the inside. The air between them tightened, charged, electric. Lila felt it race over her skin like static before a lightning strike, lifting the fine hairs at her nape, sinking into her bloodstream, finding marrow. Mate. The certainty slammed through her body with a force almost as violent as labor. Heat burst low in her belly, braided itself with pain, and shot up her spine. Her wolf, weak from hunger and confinement, still rose snarling and wild, pressing against her ribs with a single relentless cry. Mine, not the child, not survival. Him. It made no sense. She was shackled in a smuggler's cellar, soaked in fear and blood, her dress torn, her ankles flayed raw, and the Alpha King of the Mountain Realms had just dropped through a broken trapdoor like a war god called by rage. Another contraction ripped through her before she could process it. She folded forward with a gasp, palms splayed under her belly. The chain clanged. Scarjaw made a wet, choking sound and tried to bring his knife up anyway. Bastion moved with terrifying calm. He shifted one step, twisted his wrist, and hurled Scarjaw across the cellar like refuse. The rogue struck the far beam and dropped in a heap, breath knocked loose, limbs tangled. "Don't!" Lila rasped, though she wasn't sure whether she meant don't kill him yet, don't come closer, or don't look at me like that. Bastion's jaw flexed. Blood ran from a cut at his temple into the loose crown braid against his cheek. "He touched you." It wasn't a question. It was a sentence already carrying punishment. From above came the fading clang of steel and distant howls as his war patrol finished the fort. The sound seemed far away, muffled by the roar in Lila's ears. She watched Bastion's hands instead, broad, scarred, and shaking once before they stilled. Not from fear of battle, from restraint. Scarjaw coughed, rolled, and reached blindly for the dropped crossbow. Bastion turned his head, expression flattening to winter stone. "No." One syllable, command wrapped in death. He crossed the distance in 2 strides, planted a boot on Scarjaw's wrist, and drove a blade down cleanly through the rogue's throat. Efficient, final, no theatrics, no mercy. When he looked back at her, the gold in his eyes had receded, leaving that uncanny silver shot with blue. "Can you breathe through the pain?" Lila blinked at him. Of all things, that was what he asked. Her voice broke. "I think so." "Good." He crouched slowly, making his massive frame smaller, keeping both empty hands visible. "My name is Bastion Darkhollow. I am not going to touch you without permission. Do you understand me?" She stared, thrown by the formal tone, the control in it. Kings did not ask. Men like Lachlan did not ask. Rogues laughed at asking. A tremor passed through her belly. "The baby is coming." "I know." His nostrils flared again, and that brutal tenderness returned to his mouth like pain. "May I break the chain?" Lila nodded once. He reached for the iron ring dragging from her ankle. Muscles flexed beneath wet black armor. Metal screamed, then snapped in his fist. He set the broken shackle aside with care, as if afraid even discarded iron might hurt her again. The bond pulsed when his knuckles brushed her skin. White heat, and a dizzying drop, like stepping off a cliff and discovering wings midway down. She jerked, and his hand stopped instantly. "Too much?" he asked. She swallowed. "No, just strange." His mouth almost softened. Strange is one word for it. A shout sounded from above. "My king, yard secured," Bastion answered without looking away from her. "Healer, now, and a litter with clean furs. No one enters until I call." His voice hardened. "No one." "Yes, my king." Lila tried to push up and nearly collapsed as another contraction seized her hips in a vice. Bastion was there but did not touch her until she grabbed his forearm with both hands and crushed hard enough to feel tendons shift. He let her. "Look at me," he said. She did, because his voice gave her something fixed to cling to. "Breathe in for 4. Out for 6. He counted with her, low and even, while the wave crested and tore through her back. Again. Good. Again. When it eased, sweat chilled on her skin. She realized her nails had cut crescents into his arm through leather. He had not flinched. "Why?" she whispered, hazy with pain and adrenaline and bond fire. "Why are you here?" His expression turned razor sharp. Because rogues have been running children and silver through this pass, and because someone paid them to cage a pregnant duskwalker wolf under my border watch. A beat. Because I smelled you and nearly tore my own men apart to get down this hatch. The honesty struck harder than charm ever could. Boots pounded on the ladder. A gray-haired healer dropped into the cellar carrying satchels, took one look at Lila, and swore under his breath. She needs warmth, water, and clean space. This floor will kill her before labor does. We're moving her now, Bastian said. Lila's hand clamped harder around his wrist. Panic spiked. Not back to a cage. Never. The word came out rough, immediate. He waited until she met his eyes again. You ride in my command tent with the healer. No chains, no locked door. The bond thrummed approval, infuriating and comforting at once. She hated that her body wanted to trust what her mind still feared. The healer knelt, brisk but not unkind. Can you stand? Lila nodded, lied, and tried. Her knees buckled. Bastian caught her elbow only, careful, steadying without claiming. May I carry you? He asked. Tears burned unexpectedly. She was too tired to hide them. Yes. He slid one arm behind her back and one beneath her knees, lifting as though she weighed nothing, though she felt every tremor that ran through him when her belly pressed his chest. He angled his body to shield her from the sight of Scarjaw's corpse and mounted the ladder in 2 powerful movements. Night struck like cold water. The yard of the abandoned fort was a ruin of smoke, scattered weapons, and sprawled rogue bodies. Torches hissed in rain. Wolves in war leathers snapped into bowed silence as Bastian emerged carrying her. No one stared directly at her face, but she felt the shock ripple through the patrol when their king's aura curled around her like an iron wall. A litter waited, lined with dark furs and steaming water skins. Bastian set her down only long enough for the healer to check blood and pressure, then climbed in beside her despite mud and gore soaking his armor. My king, one captain began, hesitant. Scouts report movement east of the pass. Give the order to sweep and hold, Bastian said. You command until dawn. I am occupied. Occupied with her. The litter lurched forward. Rain drummed the canvas overhead. Lila curled around her belly as pain climbed and fell, climbed and fell. Each time, Bastian offered his hand and counted her breathing in that same battlefield cadence, concise, steady, free of pity. Between contractions, he gave clipped reports to the healer, water intake, timing, blood loss, as if she were a campaign he intended to win at any cost. At one point, when the litter dipped through a rut, warm dampness trickled again between her thighs, and terror ripped through her chest. Is it? She choked. The healer checked quickly, calm despite the jolting ride. Not full rupture. Hear me, girl. Membrane still holding high. Could be stress leak, could be fore fluid, could be your body preparing. Not ideal, but not the final break yet. He met her eyes until she focused. You are not done. Breathe. Not done. The words lodged in her like a stake she could hold. By the time they reached camp, her teeth were chattering from cold and shock. She expected a crowded infirmary, guards, strangers touching her. Instead, Bastian kicked open his own command tent and ordered everyone out except the healer. Inside, brazier heat and pine smoke replaced the stench of cellar rot. Maps lay weighted by daggers across a campaign table. His cloak hung near the cot, rain-soaked and dark. He stripped gauntlets with his teeth, tossed them aside, and knelt before her boots. Lila flinched. What are you doing? Cleaning wounds. He held up a cloth. May I? The question landed like another blow. She nodded, speechless. He washed mud and dried blood from her ankles with painstaking gentleness, revealing torn skin where shackles had chewed nearly to bone. His big hands were clumsy only with care, never with power. When she hissed, he paused. When a contraction ceased, he set the basin away and gave her his hand again. 4 in, he murmured. 6 out. I've got you. No command, no demand to be strong, just presence. Hours blurred. The healer checked dilation, frowned, and muttered that labor had stalled under stress but could resume violently. She and the babe need rest, he said. No traveling till morning at least. Maybe longer. We stay, Bastian answered. At some point, Lila woke from a jagged doze with a cry trapped in her throat, certain for one disoriented second that chain links were still around her ankles. She shoved at the blankets, breath spiraling. Lila! Bastian's voice came from near, not above. You're in camp. You're free. He was crouched by the cot, armor removed now, shirt open at the throat, a fresh bandage crossing his ribs. He kept distance, hands on his own knees. Where are the guards? She asked hoarsely. Outside the perimeter? Not at your door. She turned her head. The tent flap stood untied, open to the fire-lit lane beyond. No bar. No lock. I can't sleep when doors are shut, she admitted before she could swallow the confession. He nodded once, as if receiving tactical information. Then it stays open. Another nightmare dragged her up sometime before dawn. This time she heard quiet breathing and found him stretched on a folded cloak just outside the tent entrance, one forearm over his eyes, sword within reach. Not inside where she might feel watched. Not far where she might feel abandoned. A line held with intention. She watched him for a long minute in the dark, the rise and fall of his chest, the way one hand stayed half-curled toward his weapon even asleep. She thought of all the stories told about Alpha Kings, cruel, absolute, born to command and never bend. Then she thought of the giant male sleeping in a drafty lane so a half-stranger would not feel trapped by a closed door. A crack opened in the wall around her instincts. Not trust yet, but possibility. She should have felt trapped by his attention. Instead, for the first time in 3 nights, her heartbeat eased. By morning, the rain had turned to brittle sunlight. Labor pains had spaced but not vanished, leaving her body wrung out and sore. Bastian insisted on a covered wagon rather than horseback for the journey to his stronghold, then walked beside it most of the way, checking on her every mile and never once touching her belly without asking first. At the gates, banners snapped over black stone towers. Courtiers and guards lined the yard, drawn by rumor and scent. The whispers started before the wagon stopped. Duskwalker exile. Rogue-bred liar. She's carrying gods. Is that the king's? Lila stepped down carefully, spine rigid. Her crushed braid hung loose over one shoulder, still smelling faintly of wild lavender beneath smoke and sweat. She lifted her chin because that was all she had left to lift. Bastian came to her side, close enough that his aura rolled outward in warning. You walk with me, he said quietly. Inside the council chamber, heat from the hearth couldn't cut the frost in the room. Elders in layered furs watched from a crescent of carved chairs. At the center stood a narrow-faced council elder Lila recognized from winter treaties, Garen Vale, famed for polite cruelty. His eyes skimmed her torn hem, swollen legs, and bruises with clinical distaste. Your Majesty, with respect, this is reckless. Acclaimed traitor from Duskwalker, found in a smuggler den, arriving heavily pregnant and suddenly presented as your mate? He spread his hands. The realm will question coercion, bloodline contamination. The child should be tested, isolated, and guarded from its own mother until legitimacy is proven. Silence hit like a slap. Lila felt herself go cold from scalp to heel. Cellar Dark rushed back. Keep her fed enough. The pup belongs to me. She opened her mouth to defend herself and heard faintly the old instinct, beg pretty. Then Bastion's aura detonated. Power crashed through the chamber in a visible wave, slamming torches sideways. Frost feathered across the nearest window panes. Several wolves dropped their gazes instantly. One young noble stumbled back and bowed to the floor. Bastian took one deliberate step forward, and even Garen's scent spiked with fear. "Choose your next words carefully," Bastian said, voice soft enough to be lethal. "Any hand that reaches for Lila Duskwalker without her consent will be removed at the wrist." No one breathed. He continued, each word carved in iron. "She is under my protection as mate and as honored guest of the crown. Effective now, she receives queen consort protections before rites are complete. Write it." A scribe fumbled for quill. Garen tried again, weaker. "Majesty, protocol requires... Protocol is amended." Bastian did not raise his voice. "Every accusation against her is retried before neutral alphas. All evidence from Duskwalker proceedings is impounded and reviewed for forgery. Any lord spreading claims that I forced this bond will present proof before my war council or answer for sedition." Murmurs rippled, shocked and sharp. Bastian turned his head toward Lila then, and the killing cold in his expression altered by a degree. "Do you wish to speak?" The question, public and simple, struck harder than the threat. She had not been asked what she wished in days, maybe years. Lila stepped forward on shaking legs. "I was accused of leading hunters to our border markers," she said, voice rough but steady. "I was sentenced to exile in the Duskwalker Hall. My alpha cousin, Lachlan Ashford, did not take me to exile. He sold me at an abandoned border fort used for salt, silver, and stolen children. He ordered them to keep me alive until my child was born." She let the chamber hear the words clearly. Let them sit in the carved rafters. "I will testify under blood oath," she finished, "and I will face any neutral tribunal you call." No one laughed. No one called her liar. Garen's mouth tightened. "Convenient story." Bastian's gaze snapped to him, and for a second Lila thought the elder would die where he stood. Instead, the king said, "Then you should welcome an open trial." A few elders bowed in reluctant agreement. The scribe's quill scratched furiously. When the session adjourned, attendants moved as if through a storm zone, careful not to cross Bastian's path. Lila remained near the center of the chamber, lightheaded with adrenaline. Her wolf still paced, alert for the next blow that had not come. Bastian approached but stopped an arm's length away. "You held your ground." She gave a brittle laugh. "I almost vomited on your council floor." "Would have improved some speeches." The dry edge of humor surprised a real breath out of her. It hurt less than crying. He glanced toward the corridor where servants waited with fresh linens and broth. "Your rooms are prepared. 2 doors, both unbarred from the inside. Healer posted by request only. If you want distance from me, say it and it will be honored." Lila studied him, massive silhouette still, blood now cleaned from his face, eyes watchful and tired and impossibly patient for a male with his reputation. She remembered his body on the floor outside her tent, cloak under his head so she wouldn't wake feeling caged. "I don't want distance," she heard herself say. Something fierce and relieved flashed across his features, gone quickly. "Then I'll stay near." A contraction tightened low, not full labor, but warning. She pressed her palm to her belly and winced. Instantly his attention dropped to the movement, then lifted back to her face, waiting. "May I?" he asked, hand hovering inches from her stomach. This time, when she nodded, she did it without flinching. His palm settled warm and careful over the hard curve. The bond answered with a deep, resonant pull, still frightening, still new, but no longer only chaos. Under his hand, the baby shifted once, strong and certain. Bastian looked almost wrecked by the feeling. "Hello, little one," he murmured, voice gone rough. Lila watched him, watched the king who had torn a door from its hinges and then asked permission for every touch. and felt the first lock inside her chest click open. Not all the way. Enough for light to enter. The first lock had barely clicked open when a horn split the corridor beyond the chamber doors. 3 long notes, then 1 short. The formal call for truce envoys at the gate. Bastion's hand stayed over her belly for 1 more heartbeat, then lifted. His jaw hardened as an officer strode in, knelt, and kept his gaze on the floor. Majesty. Duskwalker banners at the outer court, white cloth tied to their spears. Lachlan Ashford requests audience under law. The chamber, already half empty, seemed to inhale and freeze. Lila felt her wolf slam against her ribs so hard she nearly doubled over. Lachlan was here. Not a rumor whispered over maps, not a name in blood and memory. Here, in black stone halls, under a truce he would use like a knife. Bastion did not look away from her. Do you want him admitted? The question landed like a hand around her spine, steadying. Still shaking, she nodded once. If he came this far, he wants witnesses. Don't give him the story that we hid. Then we do it publicly, Bastion said. To the officer, great hall, full council, neutral scribes, search every envoy to skin and bone. Any hidden silver? Remove it. The officer thumped a fist over his heart and ran. By the time they entered the great hall, storm light had gone iron gray at the windows. Garin Vale stood with 3 border lords, mouths thin and eager for spectacle. Scribes lined the left wall. Wolves from Bastion's war patrol kept the aisle clear, shoulders broad, eyes sharp. Lachlan Ashford walked in smiling. He wore mourning black edged in duskwalker blue, as if he were attending a funeral he had paid for. His hair was tied in the same careful knot he had worn when he pronounced her exile. There was no blood on him, no mud, no sign of the cellar where he had sold her breathing body by weight and promise. Cousin, he said, voice warm enough to rot teeth. He bowed first to Bastion, then gave Lila a long, pitying look. Thank the moon you're alive. We feared the rogues had taken your mind. Lila tasted copper. You paid them. A soft chuckle. Grief makes stories out of fear. He lifted a leather case and handed it to a page, who passed it to the nearest scribe. Scrolls slid out, sealed in wax. Affidavits, witness marks, hunter tracks near border stones. Testimony from 2 Duskwalker sentries she recognized, and knew could be bought with silver and rank. I come with proof and peace, Lachlan said. Recognize me as acting alpha of Duskwalker lands until succession is settled, and I will accept your unusual claim of mate bond without protest. His eyes flicked to Lila's stomach. The child may remain under crown protection, monitored by neutral guardians until questions of blood are resolved. The hall erupted in murmurs. Bastion's aura rolled out like winter surf, making candles gutter. You came to bargain for a woman you trafficked. I came to preserve stability, Lachlan replied smoothly. Border pacts already whisper that the Alpha King forced bond on a prisoner in labor. I defend your honor by offering compromise. There it was, the real blade, not steel, story. If enough pacts believed she had been taken, not chosen, Bastion's enemies would call him tyrant and fracture the mountain accords. Lila stepped down 1 stair before anyone could stop her. Say it under blood oath, she said. Say you did not sell me. Say you did not order them to keep me alive until the baby came. A winter hearth memory surfaced with knife-edge clarity, her mother's voice over mending, telling the old Duskwalker women's tale that oath stone could hold memory when blood was willingly given by a true-line daughter. Lachlan had always mocked it as superstition. Lila had never known whether to believe it, only that moon court stones were said to remember. Lachlan met her gaze, and for an instant the smile slipped. She saw the old contempt beneath it, bright and cold. Then he spread his hands. Gladly. At Duskwalker Moon Court. where your line's oath stones stand. Let all packs watch. Let truth decide. He turned back to Bastion. Moonrise tomorrow. Unless the crown prefers delay. Garin spoke from the side, oily and loud enough for all to hear. A neutral ancestral court would silence rumor faster than closed hearings here. Bastion didn't even glance his way. We will answer by dusk. Lachlan inclined his head, as though they discussed weather. As guards moved to escort him, he paused beside Lila, close enough that only she and Bastion could hear. You look so much like your mother when she was scared, he murmured. She bled bravely too. Then he walked out under truce cloth, leaving the hall full of ice. The doors shut. The noise began at once. Border lords argued about jurisdiction. Garin pressed for immediate acceptance of Moon Court challenge. 2 captains demanded Lachlan's arrest. Truce law be damned. Scribes scratched like rats in grain. Lila stood in the center of it, heart pounding unevenly, her baby shifting hard and low as if bracing. Bastion cut through the clamor with one command. Silence. It dropped, ragged but real. We do not break truce law in my hall, he said. Not because he deserves it, because law survives men. We answer at dusk. His gaze moved to Lila. Until then, no one approaches her without consent. Any violation is treason. He took her from the hall through a private corridor lined with old battle maps. Only when the doors sealed behind them did she let out the breath she'd held since Lachlan smiled. He said my mother, she whispered. Bastion's expression shifted, anger turning precise. I heard. She died 6 years ago. Hunting fall. Everyone said so. Lila pressed her palm into the wall until stone bit skin. He looked proud when he said it. A captain caught up at a run, face tight. Majesty. Intercepts from East villages. Copies of broadsheets are spreading. Claim says the queen consort was coerced. Child conceived by uncertain sire. Crown intends to steal Duskwalker succession. Bastion took the folded pages, scanned, and handed one to Lila. The script was neat, official. Her name sat between lies like a pinned insect. How far? Bastion asked. 6 market towns by noon. More riders likely. Bastion's expression went dangerously still. These were printed before he ever asked for truce. He deployed riders days ago. Burn every copy you find. Arrest distributors, not readers. Follow silver trails. The captain nodded and vanished. Lila crumpled the page. He came here to perform concern and seed rebellion. He came to make every choice cost blood, Bastion said. If I refuse Moon Court, I look afraid. If I accept, he drags you to ancestral ground while you're in labor. Another contraction seized her lower belly, sharper than the last. She bowed forward with a hiss. Bastion was at her side instantly, not touching until she caught his wrist and dragged his hand where the pain clenched. Breathe with me, he said, voice low, the same cadence he'd used in the command tent. 4 in, 6 out. She obeyed, because it worked, because his steadiness gave her somewhere to put fear. When it eased, she stayed leaning into him a moment longer than necessity required. The bond pulsed warm between them. Attraction threaded through danger so tightly she couldn't separate one from the other. It terrified her how much she wanted that warmth anyway. I can't be hidden, she said quietly. If I disappear now, he wins the story. I know. Bastion's hand remained at her back, broad and careful. I would still lock 10 doors around you if you asked. Would you open them when I said? His eyes met hers, silver shot with blue, exhausted and absolute. Every time. By late afternoon, the stronghold had become a hive under smoke. Messengers ran between towers. Smiths hammered hinge spikes onto inner gates. Garon and 2 allied elders requested private conference twice and were denied twice. The healer checked Lila, frowned at the spacing of contractions, and ordered rest she could not take. Bastion moved through command rooms like a storm held on a chain. He reviewed Lachlan's scrolls with neutral jurists, summoned trackers, and ordered ledgers seized from the abandoned border fort inventory. Lila insisted on joining the records review despite protests. Bastion compromised by bringing the records to a smaller strategy chamber off her suite so she could sit with her legs elevated while she worked. Parchment covered the table by sunset. Smuggler tallies, payment marks, caravan routes for salt and silver, and children listed as special cargo. Lila swallowed bile and kept reading. Here, she said, tapping a line item marked in cipher. This symbol. Not rogue code. Court apothecary sigil from old Duskwalker stores. My mother used to buy fever tincture stamped like this. Bastion leaned over her shoulder, heat radiating from his chest even through his shirt. You're sure? Almost. The upper loop is clipped. Could be copied. She traced the margin where numbers had been scraped and rewritten. Payment doubled for viable blood, royal mated preferred. The room went silent except for the wind at the shutters. Captain Ivor, standing guard inside the door, said, "That reads like breeding stock." No. Lila's voice came out flat. Worse. Harvest. Bastion's fingers curled on the table edge until wood creaked. Alchemists. Another messenger arrived before anyone could reply, mud to his knees. Majesty, we caught a courier leaving the envoy stables. Carried letters with Ashford's seal addressed to border alphas. Same accusations as broadsheets, plus an offer of trade rights through the pass if they recognize him. Where is he now? Cells. Bastion nodded once. Interrogate with witness present. No torture unless tribunal approves. As the messenger left, Lila laughed bitterly. He sells people and still bargains like a prince. You were right in the chamber, Bastion said. He wants witnesses. He wants legitimacy. Moon Court gives him both. He crouched beside her chair, bringing their eyes level. You do not have to walk into that circle tomorrow. She stared at him. And spend the rest of my life hearing that I hid behind your crown? That my child was protected because I was weak? I don't call survival weakness. Neither do I. But this is mine. The intensity in his face softened into something rougher, more vulnerable than command. Then let me stand close enough to kill anyone who breathes wrong. Her mouth almost curved. That, my king, sounds like compromise. Night settled hard, rain tapping against the arrow slits. Servants brought broth and left quickly, eyes down. Lila managed 3 swallows before nausea turned her away. The healer made notes, checked pulse, checked belly, and finally withdrew to the outer room when Lila promised to call at once if pains changed. For the first time since dawn, there was no one inside with them but darkness and lamplight. Bastion sat on the floor by the hearth instead of taking the carved chair, long legs stretched, forearms resting on his knees. He had removed his boots and gauntlets. The fresh bandage at his ribs peeked beneath his loose shirt when he moved. The sight of him unarmored did something dangerous to her chest. Come here, he said softly, patting the rug between his feet. She raised a brow. Order? Request, with shameless motive. You look like your back is killing you. It was. She lowered herself carefully, biting a sound when pressure hit her hips. Bastion waited until she settled against his chest, then began pressing firm circles into the knotted muscles beside her spine. He asked before each shift of his hands. Lower? Here? Too much? The patience undid her more than the touch. After a while, she said, In the cellar, I kept hearing them laugh through the trapdoor. Even when it was quiet, I heard it. His hands stilled, then resumed, gentler. I hear steel in my sleep, he said. Always the moment before it enters. I wake reaching for a sword. She turned slightly to look at him. You, a humorless half-smile. Kings are not born fearless. We are simply denied the luxury of admitting fear in public. The fire popped. Rain deepened. I'm scared of this bond, she whispered. Not of you. of needing, of not knowing what's me and what's Wolf and what's pulled. Bastian was silent long enough she thought she'd wounded him. Then he said, "If you ever ask for release, I will bring the blood priest myself. Mate bond can be severed before full rites. Painful, but possible. Your will first. Always." The words hit like a strike, because he meant them. Lila reached back and found his hand, threading her fingers through his scarred ones. "I don't want release." He bowed his head to her shoulder, breath warm at her neck. "Then I am the luckiest bastard in these mountains." Emotion rose too fast. She swallowed it and failed. "He called me weak for crying. Lachlan. Once, when my mother died." Bastian's arm tightened around her. "Crying is not weakness. Cruelty is." She leaned into him, eyes burning. "I think he killed her." His heartbeat kicked against her back, sudden and hard. "Tell me everything." "She went hunting and didn't return. They found her near the North Ravine. Said she slipped. But she knew those trails blindfolded. And he just... Today..." He sounded like he remembered her bleeding. Bastian rested his chin lightly on her hair. "Then tomorrow, we drag truth into daylight." She turned in his arms before she could lose courage. Their faces were close, breaths mingling, the bond a live wire humming between ribs and throat. "If I ask you to step back when it's my fight," she said, voice barely audible, "can you?" His eyes darkened. "I can. I will hate it." "Good." That earned a short laugh, then faded as he brushed a thumb under her eye, wiping tears she hadn't noticed. He waited. She closed the last distance first. The kiss was slow, careful, almost reverent. Nothing like the frantic heat she expected from the bond. It tasted of rain and smoke and promise. When they parted, he pressed his forehead to hers. "No more cages," he murmured. "Not even gilded ones," she whispered back. A knock hammered the outer door before either moved. "Majesty!" Ivor's voice cracked. "Fire in the records wing!" Everything shattered at once. Bastian was on his feet, hauling her up with him, one arm braced around her as another contraction hit. Smoke already threaded under the inner door, acrid and thick. From the corridor came shouting, boots, the clang of alarm bells. "Stay behind me," he snapped, opening the door into chaos. Guards sprinted past carrying water skins. Flames licked from the far stairwell where the archive room sat, exactly where the impounded Duskwalker evidence had been stored. Too convenient. Too fast. Ivor appeared with 2 wolves and a drawn blade. "Started in 3 places. Oil jars, we caught one servant with ember paste under his nails. Says he was paid through envoy coin." "Lachlan!" Lila gasped. Servant bit his tongue before naming. A crash sounded from the opposite wing, followed by a woman's scream. The healer's room. Lila didn't think. She ran. "Lila!" Bastian thundered, but she was already down the passage, belly heavy, lungs burning. She hit the healer's door and slammed it open. The room was overturned, bottles shattered, herbs ground under boots. The gray-haired healer lay against the wall, blood at his temple, hands bound with medical cord. Over him stood a man in stable livery with a knife, one hand gripping a satchel stuffed with vials. He saw Lila and lunged. Her wolf surged. She caught his wrist with both hands, pain ripping through her lower back as he drove forward. The knife edge sliced her forearm. Hot blood spilled. Before he could strike again, Bastian hit him from the side like a falling wall, snapping the man's arm backward until bone broke through skin. Guards flooded in. Ivor kicked the knife away. "Alive," Bastian growled, pinning the attacker by throat and shoulder. "He talks before he dies." The man spat blood and grinned with half his teeth. "Too late." He jerked his chin toward the satchel. Ivor tore it open. Inside, wrapped in linen, lay 3 glass ampules and a folded note sealed in black wax. Bastian ripped the seal and read. His face went still in the way that meant murder. Lila snatched the parchment from his hand. Moonrise. Duskwalker Mooncourt. Come with the woman and the unborn heir if you want antidote and names. Refuse, and every border well marked on the enclosed map receives the same tincture by dawn. Ask your queen consort what tincture did to Mara Duskwalker 6 winters past. For a second she could not see. The room tilted. Her mother's laugh, her mother's hands guiding breath through pain, her mother's body broken in a ravine that should never have killed her. He poisoned her, Lila said, voice gone raw. He poisoned my mother. The healer groaned from the floor. Majesty, those vials? He coughed, eyes struggling to focus. Not fever medicine, blood catalyst, triggers organ collapse in wolves. Slow at first, faster with stress. If put in wells? Another contraction slammed through Lila so violently her knees buckled. Warm liquid rushed down her thighs. Bastian caught her before she hit stone. His gaze dropped, then snapped back up, panic and fury warring behind controlled breath. Her waters broke. The healer dragged himself up on one elbow, face ashen. Yes, this is the full rupture. Earlier seep could have been stress loss or forefluid. This is the true break. Too early. Maybe from shock. She needs bed now. If bleeding increases, we lose both. From the burning wing came a roar as a roof beam failed. Somewhere outside, a horn sounded from the gate tower. 1 blast, 2, 3. The signal for departing riders under truce escort. Lachlan was leaving. Bastian looked from the note in Lila's shaking hand to the smoke-choked corridor, to the blood on her forearm, to the water pooling at their feet. 1 enemy running, 1 mother in labor. 1 threat to poison half the border by dawn. Seal the gates, he ordered Ivor, voice like iron breaking. No one in or out without my mark. Drag every envoy from their saddles if you have to. Ivor hesitated, glancing at Lila. And the Mooncourt demand? Lila gripped Bastian's shirt, nails biting through cloth, another pain cresting hard enough to steal breath. Through it, she forced the words out. We go, she gasped. He wants me there. Good. Let him. Bastian's jaw flexed. The bond burned between them. Fear and rage and fierce, impossible trust. He lifted her into his arms, smoke swirling around them like storm fog. Get the birthing room ready, he barked to the corridor. War Council in 10 minutes. Saddle my black. Lila clutched the poisoned note against her chest as he carried her through firelight and alarms, toward a night that had just become a battlefield. And this time she did not feel like prey. She felt like a blade being drawn. Bastian carried her through smoke and bell clamor, down black stone halls turned red by firelight. Every jolt hit low in Lila's body, each contraction sharper now that fear had a name and a target. In the birthing room, the gray-haired healer, bandaged at the temple, furious at being moved and still issuing orders, checked her, pressed herbs under her tongue, wrapped her cut forearm and forced her to breathe. Labor is moving but slowly, the healer said. Stress drove it hard. Keep her warm. Keep her angry if that's what keeps her conscious. He shot Bastian a look that bordered on insubordination. She should not be standing for a week, let alone whatever you're planning. I am on record. I can manage angry, Lila muttered, gripping the poisoned note until the edges bent. War Council came to her instead of the reverse. Ivor, soot-streaked and grim, reported the envoy riders had been stopped at the inner gate. 2 were dead by hidden poison capsules, 1 captured. Garin Vale arrived pale with smoke and outrage, only to fall silent when Bastian informed him the Moon Court would convene under Crown Guard at moonrise, and every neutral jurist on site would attend. No private bargain, no sealed testimony. Blood oath stones only. Lachlan's move became clear by fragments. broadsheets already moving through 6 market towns, whispering forced bond and false air, bribes offered to border alphas, records burned, poison sent as leverage. He had not come merely to reclaim Duskwalker. He meant to fracture the mountain accords and rise in the crack. "He wants me frightened and hidden," Lila said when the men began arguing over formations. Another contraction cinched her abdomen hard. She breathed through it, 4 in, 6 out, then met Bastion's eyes. "So I walk in standing." Bastion's jaw was a line of stone. "You walk in surrounded." "Agreed. Armored." "I am pregnant." His mouth almost twitched despite everything. "Then armed." That, she accepted. Ivor passed her a slim boot knife from the armory, single-edged, short enough for close quarters. Lila tested the weight, then slid it into the sheath strapped inside her right boot. Before they left, Bastion insisted she drink broth and salt water even while she swore at him between contractions. He stood over her with a cup and the expression of a king who could command armies, but not one stubborn female with cracked lips and too much pride. She drank because she needed strength, not because he ordered. He knew the difference and said nothing, only brushed his thumb once over the pulse in her wrist as if counting that she was still here. By moonrise, snow had begun, thin and dry, silvering the trail to the Duskwalker moon court. It sat in a hollow ringed by old pines, oath pillars rising from the ground like broken teeth around the ancestral sigil. Torches burned blue-white in iron braziers. Wolves from 3 border packs stood under truce marks. Neutral jurists in dark fur robes watched from carved benches. Duskwalker elders clustered together, faces pinched and unreadable. Lila saw shock move through them when she entered on her own feet, cloak open over her belly, wrist bound, chin high. Bastion walked 1 pace behind and to her left, exactly where a shield stood without blocking the strike. Across the circle, Lachlan Ashford smiled. He wore mourning black trimmed in Duskwalker gray, as if he were already grieving her. His hair was braided for court. His hands were clean. For one ugly heartbeat, Lila saw him at 12, handing her stolen apples behind the hall. Then the vision burned away, replaced by the cellar, the laughter, the words. "The pup belongs to me." "Cousin," he said, and spread his arms beneath the truce banner. "Thank the old gods. They told me you were kept under coercion." A murmur rippled through the court. Lachlan turned, expertly pitching his voice to Carrie. "I came only for due process, for Duskwalker law, for the safety of a child whose sire remains politically disputed." Bastion's aura rose, frost racing over the nearest brazier rims, but Lila stepped forward before he could speak. "Then swear it," she said. Lachlan's eyes flicked to her belly, to the slight tremor in her stance when another pain touched her, and confidence sharpened. "Gladly." He thought labor made her weak. He had always mistaken endurance for softness. The neutral jurist struck the staff to stone. Moon Court recognizes claim and counterclaim. By blood and oath, spoken lies fracture the witness stone. Let all parties stand within the ring. The first danger came before the swearing. As Lila crossed the sigil, a Duskwalker elder on the outer bench lurched up and flung a fistful of silver filings into the air. They flashed in torchlight and burst toward her with powdered wolfsbane smoke from a hidden clay packet. Panic exploded. Guards surged. Wolves snarled. The fumes hit hot and bitter at the back of her throat, and she staggered, vision swimming. "Down!" Bastion roared. She dropped instinctively, one knee slamming stone. Bastion's cloak whipped over her head as he hit the elder hard enough to crack a bench. Ivor tackled another man, reaching beneath his robes for a blade. Torches guttered in the sudden wind of unleashed auras. Someone screamed. A jurist shouted for order. Lila coughed, belly tightening into a brutal band while the world blurred at the edges. Hands reached for her through the cloak. Guards, maybe, maybe not. "No!" she snarled, and her wolf surged with enough force to throw them back. "Don't touch me." She ripped the cloak off and got to her feet alone, chest heaving, silver dust streaking her skirts. Across the ring, Lachlan held both palms up in practiced outrage. "Treason in a sacred court," he said. "You see what desperation drives men to when a king drags a compromised woman into ritual." The nearest oath stone split with a sharp crack. Silence fell so fast it rang. Lila looked at the black fracture running down the pale stone and understood suddenly exactly how she would end this. She did not wait for permission. "I challenge as Alpha Blood claimant of Mara Duskwalker's line," she called, voice carrying clearer than she felt. "Not as his mate, not as his ward, as daughter of the Cedar Oath and rightful heir." Duskwalker elders jerked as if struck. The jurists exchanged looks. Garin Vale, standing stiff under guard, stared at her with a calculating expression that turned uneasy when the ground itself answered. The ancestral sigil under Lila's boots warmed. Old stories rushed back. Stories Lachlan dismissed as women's tales told over winter mending. Duskwalker daughters who could wake memory in oath stone with blood willingly given. Lila had never tried. Never needed to. Tonight, need burned hotter than fear. She pulled the knife from her boot. Bastion moved one half step, instinct blazing in the bond, then stopped when she shot him a look. "We talked about this." She thought at him through pain and fury and love. "Let me." His hands curled at his sides. He bowed his head once. Lila cut her palm over the center mark. Blood struck carved stone. The sigil flared silver, then deep forest green. Wind spiraled inward, flattening torch flames. Every oath pillar rang low and resonant, and the fractured witness stones bled black light through their cracks. Gasps broke from the benches. "Speak, Lachlan Ashford," the neutral jurist said hoarsely, "and let the court judge." Lachlan's mask slipped only for a blink. Then he recovered, smiling thinner. "Gladly." Lila Duskwalker was condemned by lawful counsel for leading hunters to our border markers. Black lines crawled wider through 2 stones. I escorted her to exile and never saw her again. A 3rd stone cracked. "I sought this tribunal solely to secure the unborn child from royal coercion." The oath pillar behind him shuddered, and the black fractures spilled outward like ink in water, then sharpened into images. Memory echoes. The whole court saw it at once. Lachlan in the abandoned border fort yard, tossing a purse to Scarjaw. No marks above the collar. Another echo, closer, his mouth near Lila's throat as she struggled. "The pup belongs to me." Then the one that emptied the air from the circle entirely. Lachlan's voice, cold and bored, saying, "Keep her breathing till the whelp drops." Noise erupted, shouts, snarls, an elder vomiting, jurists standing, Duskwalker wolves recoiling from their own acting alpha. Lachlan spun toward the pillar, face gone white with rage. "Forgery!" he barked. "Dark hollow tricks!" The stone answered with one more echo unbidden. A dim room, alchemist glass, Lachlan's hand setting a vial beside a map, while an unseen voice asked, "And the mother?" Lachlan replied, "Mara drank once and died slow. The daughter lives till I have the heir." Lila's knees nearly buckled. Her mother's death, 6 years of grief and doubt, laid bare before everyone. Something inside her went still and sharp. Another contraction hit, huge and wrenching, driving a cry from her throat. Lachlan saw it and moved. He lunged across the ring with silvered claws strapped over his hands, truce banner forgotten, aiming straight for her belly. Bastion intercepted in a blur, forearm braced. Silver screeched on steel and skin, blood sheeted down his wrist. He hit Lachlan once, hard enough to send him skidding across the sigil. "Bastion!" Lila snarled, breath ragged, half doubled over. "Back!" Every wolf in the court froze. Even Lachlan looked stunned. Bastian's eyes flashed molten gold, then silver blue again. He stepped back, blood dripping from his hand, body coiled to kill if she faltered. "Your fight," he said, each word torn out. "End him." Lachlan laughed, wild now, spitting red. "You can barely stand." Lila shifted. The change tore through her mid-contraction like fire through wet cloth. Bone ground, skin rippled. Somewhere beneath conscious thought, the old knowledge answered. Wolf-born children survived the shift because their mothers' bodies shifted around them, not through them. The womb, the last thing to change, and the first to resettle. Pain became power. Her wolf burst free, smaller than Bastion's war beast but fast, dusk gray with a white blaze at the throat and eyes bright as storm glass. The court reeled from the force of her line, waking in full. She hit Lachlan before he finished inhaling, jaws clamping his forearm, driving him backward. He shifted too, bigger, heavier, rage slick and off balance. They crashed against an oath pillar. Stone rang. Lachlan slashed, silver catching fur at her shoulder. Heat flared and she tasted blood, his and hers. He tried to twist toward her belly, still carrying the old habit of attacking what he thought she protected most. She gave him the opening on purpose. When he drove in, she dropped, hooked his wounded leg. The one she had kicked in the cellar echoed in memory and instinct together, then surged upward, using his momentum to slam him throat first against the pillar. Cracks raced through old mortar. The memory echo behind him repeated, relentless and public. "Keep her breathing till the whelp drops." He gagged, claws scrabbling for purchase. Lila shifted back just enough to speak. Half crouched, one hand fisted in his hair, the other braced to his chest while labor shook through her body in savage waves. "You used my child as a crown," she said, voice raw and carrying. "Now watch me take yours." His eyes bulged with hate. "You were always the weak one, Lila." She bared blood-slick teeth. "Weak girls don't survive cellars. You made a queen in the dark." Then she shifted her jaws and bit through his throat. Hot blood flooded her mouth. Lachlan thrashed once, twice, heels drumming stone. The oath pillar held him upright for the length of a heartbeat, while the court watched his life leave in pulses. Then he collapsed at her feet, black blood spreading over the ancestral sigil. No one moved. Lila stood over him trembling, chest heaving, one hand to the underside of her belly as another contraction rolled through her hard enough to blur the torches. Bastian was there instantly, not rescuing, not taking the victory, simply bracing her elbow while she stayed standing. The neutral jurist found his voice first. "By witness stone and blood oath law, Lachlan Ashford is judged traitor, poisoner, and false claimant." Bastian did not look away from Lila when he spoke. "Burn the body under judgment law. Scatter no ashes on Duskwalker ground." No one challenged the sentence. What followed blurred into commands and testimony and the practical machinery of power catching up to truth. Ivor dragged the surviving conspirators forward, including the elder who had thrown Wolfsbane. Under oath, the captured envoy named coin routes, bribed alchemists, and the sabotage orders on the records wing. Garen Vale, sweating now that the room's fear had changed direction, tried once to frame his earlier demands as prudence, only to receive a stare from Lila so cold he fell silent and asked the scribe to record his support for retrial protocol in full. The healer, hauled to the court in blankets and fury, identified the vials publicly and directed riders to the marked wells with antidote teams before dawn. Neutral alphas sealed the orders under mountain accord. Through it all, Lila remained upright until the last signature because she wanted every elder who had looked away in Duskwalker Hall to watch her claim what they had denied. When at last the court adjourned and the dead were carried out, she nearly folded in on herself. Bastian caught her under the knees before she hit stone. "Easy, Duskfire. I'm not done," she whispered, though her teeth chattered with exhaustion. "No," he said, carrying her through the snow toward the old mountain cedar at the edge of the court. But this part is ours. The cedar stood where Duskwalker mates had sworn for generations, branches black against a paling horizon. Snow hissed softly on the braziers behind them. The healer shouted from 20 paces away that she needed a bed, not a ceremony. Ivor pretended not to hear while posting guards farther out. For the first time since the cellar, no walls boxed her in. Bastian set her on a wool cloak at the cedar's roots and knelt in the snow before her, massive and blood-stained, one hand hovering near her belly but not touching. His injured forearm was wrapped, his ribs bandaged beneath an open shirt, his face striped with drying blood and melted snow. He looked like war, and like home. There was no time for the old three-part ceremony. They both knew it. A contraction was already building, and the healer's cursing carried clearly through the cold air. Bastian laid his sword aside, point down in the snow, and placed both palms flat on his thighs, asking as male, not monarch. Lila Duskwalker. As wolf, as man, as equal in crown and law. Will you have my mark? One question instead of three. All of it bound into a single breath. The bond hummed, hot and bright, but he waited. Tears burned unexpectedly. Not possession, not shelter traded for silence. Equal. Yes, she said, voice breaking on the word. I will. He leaned in slowly enough for her to stop him. She threaded her fingers into his loose crown braid and guided him the last inch. His mouth found the curve where neck met shoulder. One brief kiss, then his teeth pressed. Mine, he whispered, like a question and a prayer. Yours, she breathed. Mate. The bite landed. Pain flashed white, clean and deep, and then changed. Fire spread from the puncture in a molten ring, racing down her spine, through her chest, into the hard ache of labor and the torn places fear had lived. It did not erase pain. It braided through it, turning agony into something bearable, then powerful, then luminous. She felt Bastian's shock at her strength, his fury at the cellar, his endless restraint, the lonely vigilance of a king who slept outside doors so others would not fear him inside them. Underneath all of it pulsed a steadier thing, devotion without cage. She cried out and arched into him, half from hurt, half from the rush of pleasure that followed, fierce enough to steal language. His hand spread over her back, careful of claws and strain, anchoring her as the mark sealed. When he drew back, blood warm on his mouth, the world sounded different. Every heartbeat nearby stood distinct. Her wolf surged forward, greedy and exultant. My turn, she said. He bared his throat without hesitation, turning his shoulder toward her in deliberate offering. I give this freely. Mark me. The consent hit her harder than instinct. She breathed in. Him, snow, blood, cedar sap, and bit into the thick curve of his shoulder where neck met muscle. Royal blood flooded her tongue, hot and wild. He groaned, low, shocked, reverent, as her mark sank in. His strength hit her first, vast and disciplined, then split open to reveal tenderness he hid from the world, the moment in the cellar when he smelled her and knew. She felt him choose restraint over wrath again and again, so she would never fear his hands. Behind all of it, a promise with teeth, no more cages. Mine, she whispered against his skin. Yours, he answered immediately, hands shaking where they held her waist. Mate. The completed bond snapped into place like a second heartbeat shared between them. Her labor pain, still real, came now with channels she could ride instead of drowning in. His presence flooded those channels, not controlling, simply there, a wall at her back and a blade at her front if she asked for either. Bastian pressed his forehead to hers, both of them panting. She touched the fresh mark at his shoulder, then her own neck, feeling heat pulse under skin. He wrapped his cloak around both of them, one hand on her upper back, the other cradling the underside of her belly. "No more cages," he murmured. She smiled, tired and feral and full. No more kings without mercy. By the time dawn bled pale gold over the pines, the mountain cedar had heard another kind of vow. Curses, breathing counts, the healer's threats. Bastion's steady voice naming every ridge visible through the snow to keep Lila anchored through the worst contractions. He never left when she swore at him. He never touched her belly without warning. When fears spiked, he gave her facts. When pain broke words apart, he gave her his hand and let her crush it. Their daughter arrived with the sun, furious and loud. The cry ripped across the cedar hollow and set every wolf waiting beyond the guard line into startled laughter and howls. Lila collapsed back against Bastion's chest, shaking and weeping and grinning at once while the healer wrapped the baby and declared, with exhausted triumph, that the child's lungs could shame a war horn. Dark hair plastered the tiny head. Her scent held cedar smoke, milk, and the first bright thread of lavender. Bastion touched one finger to the infant's cheek as if approaching sacred fire. "She sounds like you when cornered." Lila barked a laugh. "Good. Let kingdoms tremble." He looked up at her then, blood still dry at his temple, mark fresh at his shoulder, and she felt through the completed bond exactly what sat behind his controlled expression. Awe, gratitude, terror, a love so fierce it bordered on pain. She shifted the baby into the crook of his arm. He froze for half a heartbeat, then gathered their daughter with reverent precision, as if he feared breaking light itself. "She has your eyes," Lila whispered. "Poor child," he murmured, but he was smiling. By noon, proclamations rode from the Moon Court under seal of neutral jurists and crown. Lachlan Ashford condemned and dead. Duskwalker charges against Lila Void pending retrial, then erased in light of forged evidence. Mara Duskwalker's death reopened and recorded as murder by poison. The rogue smuggling line through the pass broken. The captured envoy and conspirators were remanded under Ivor's watch. The elder who threw Wolfsbane lost rank and lands. Garen Vale kept his title only after swearing public support for the new protocols and funding restoration of the burned records wing from his own coffers. His polite cruelty finally cost him coin, if not yet his neck. In the first open court held a week later, Lila stood beside Bastion, not behind him, wearing Duskwalker gray and Dark Hollow black. Before both packs, she was restored as rightful Duskwalker Alpha and crowned as queen consort by her own consent, equal by law and oath. Bastion placed no hand on the crown until she nodded. When he did, the hall bowed to both. The fresh mark at her neck gleamed above her collar. The answering mark on his shoulder showed when he moved in court leathers, and no one who saw them mistook this bond for coercion again. Her first decree was the Cellar decree. No accused wolf would be punished without open trial and recorded evidence before neutral witnesses. No pregnant she-wolf, mated or unmated, highborn or low, could be imprisoned, transported, or separated from her child without healer oversight and court order under Crown law. Violations carried judgment sentence. She added one more clause at Bastion's quiet suggestion and her own brutal experience. Any wolf suffering medical emergency, labor, wound fever, poisoning, or illness, brought before tribunal must have independent healer authority to halt proceedings until the patient was stable. No law was worth a life it claimed to protect. Law with teeth, not sentiment. The scribes named it dryly in the archives. The people named it for the woman who wrote it with a scar at her neck and a baby on her hip. Years later, they still told the story of the night the Alpha King tore off a cellar door. Children acted out the battle in muddy yards. Soldiers toasted Bastion's fury. Courtiers whispered about witness stones and black cracked lies. But in the court records, in the laws copied to 6 market towns and beyond, the title read differently: The Restoration of Lila Duskwalker, who walked out and took her life back.